If you live in the United States, hell, if you've heard of the United States, you probably know that this country has a passion for football that borders on religious. As is said many times in Him, the wildly underwhelming football horror film by Justin Tipping, even though people say God, family, football, that is probably in the wrong order for many. That's the basic premise of Him. That love for football at its extremes can be like a religion, from the athletes who give their bodies and well-being for the sake of sport, to the fans who worship at the altar of their favorite teams and players. It's a solid concept, yet that's as deep as Tipping's film ever dares to go, even if it occasionally hints at larger, more important points that are almost completely avoided.
What is Him about? From the very first time we see the young Cam Cade, his family is worshiping football. Not only are they obsessed with the San Antonio Saviors, they even have a shrine dedicated to the team. As the whole family watches the game where Isaiah White, considered potentially the greatest quarterback of all time, gets injured, Cam's dad tells his son that one day he will be the GOAT. Cut to several years later, and despite receiving what could have been a career-ending injury, Isaiah's legacy has only grown as he continues to win championship after championship. But coming up in the ranks is Cam, who seems like he might actually fulfill his dad's dream of being the greatest. One night, as he's tirelessly practicing, Cam is attacked with a blunt hit to the head and warned that continuing to play football could be extremely dangerous. Cam's dream seemed within grasp, but this injury, before he even makes it to the majors, could end it early. Yet when hope seems to be lost, Cam is personally invited to train at the private compound of Isaiah. At first, the compound seems like a place for an intense training regimen, but it's much more than that. As Isaiah trains Cam to potentially be his replacement on the Saviors, Cam is going to be tested both mentally and physically in ways that he could have never imagined to achieve greatness.
Him has potential, but squanders any deeper ideas.
From the very beginning, Him lacks any subtlety whatsoever. Tipping never hides for a second the correlation between football and religion with heavy-handed symbolism and constant reminders of faith. A practice interview session at the compound is framed to look like the Last Supper. The name Saviors is a dead giveaway of where this film's head is at, and Cam always has his father's cross around his neck, almost weighing him down at times. But because of how obvious Tipping makes this narrative, there's no question that Cam is walking right into the lion's den. For example, the first time Cam meets Isaiah, it's in a room at the compound dedicated to curing the skins of animals that Isaiah has killed. Not to mention, the scene ends with Cam hammering a nail into a piece of wood, if we needed more religious imagery. We're always aware that Cam is heading into a bad situation, and that undercuts any tension the story might actually have. Even worse, though, is how many promising angles Him hints at that it never explores. The screenplay, by Tipping, Skip Bronke, and Zach Akers, seems like it has more on its mind, yet we only get glimpses of what the deeper version of this story might have looked like. Rituals are mentioned, but never discussed any further than that there are mysterious rituals going on. Cam talks about how much family means to him frequently, yet we rarely see him spend any time with them. There's even vague demonic imagery, which just exists to imply that maybe there's some otherworldly force at hand. When things do get super wild in the final act, they occur without us knowing what the hell is really going on, even though Cam, who we've spent all of our time with, seems to know what is happening. But maybe the strangest choice in Him is that the film itself isn't really saying much about football at all. Cam continues his training, despite being told that he suffered a traumatic injury to his brain. Isaiah's doctor mentions that human skulls weren't meant to slam against other skulls, and Isaiah constantly screams that it's more than just a game, but he's barely saying anything other than that players will risk their bodies to be successful at football, which, if you don't know that going into Him, you certainly will by the end. Another odd choice that seems especially egregious in how it's poorly handled in the end is the idea that football is, by and large, rich white men gambling with the lives of talented young black men. Again, the film only hints at this, as though this was something that was further expanded on in another version of the script, but absolutely nothing is done to explore this idea. Him comes from Jordan Peele's Monkeypaw Productions, and it's hard to imagine that if Peele had been behind this project, an aspect like this would have been lost on him or this story.
Him has the look of a cool horror movie, but with none of the depth.
At least Him somewhat attempts the tone of a dark horror film and mostly succeeds. The cinematography by Cam Cade evokes a haunting murkiness, even when the direction by Tipping and this story wastes it with dumb symbolism, like a bunch of diehard fans who literally have footballs for heads, or a strangely painted fan looming in the shadows. The vibe of Him is trying to make the audience unnerved, but the story and imagery being presented are too goofy to take this attempt seriously. Tyriq Withers is fine, but he's little more than a cipher in this world of horrific football. And beyond the fact that he loves football and family, this screenplay doesn't do him any justice. At least this is a role for Marlon Wayans to go dark again after his fantastic performance in Requiem for a Dream. Again, there's no subtlety to this character, but Wayans does make Isaiah an intimidating figure at times, even when it's hard to take the rest of the film seriously. In the background of this paper-thin look at dedication to football, one can see the potential angles with promise lurking in the background. Him seemingly knows that there are deeper ideas that could be explored, but instead, Tipping's film seems willing to skirt by with just saying, "Loving football is nuts, right?" Him has a whole field to play on, and instead, it rushes and fumbles the ball. Him is now playing in theaters.